The Vorrkai High Command had a saying: "If it bleeds, it can be beaten. If it does not bleed, make it bleed." They had never met humanity. Grand Admiral Zyrek Ovaath stood on the command deck of the flagship Eternal Dominion, fingers laced behind his back, three eyes scanning the holographic star map before him. The Vorrkai were a proud species. 6,000 years of conquest, 400 civilizations brought to their knees. They had eaten empires for breakfast and used the bones as toothpicks, and now a tiny little species from a blue dot in an unremarkable spiral arm of the Milky Way had the audacity, the sheer magnificent stupidity, to say no. No. Ovaath repeated the word aloud, tasting it like something sour. They said no. His second-in-command, Fleet Marshal Bren Toll, shifted uncomfortably beside him. Bren was the kind of officer who always looked like he was about to sneeze but never actually did. Grand Admiral, to be precise, their exact response was, and I quote, "Come and get it." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the command deck. Then it died quickly when Ovaath did not laugh. 1,400 warships, Ovaath said, quietly. "We brought 1,400 warships to this system. Do you know what 1,400 warships can do to a planet, Bren?" Bren knew. Everyone knew. It was not a comfortable thing to know. The planet in question was called Earth. Small, overcrowded, loud from what intelligence reports suggested. The humans had been contacted 8 months ago, given the standard Vorrkai offer: submit, pay, tribute, contribute labor forces, and be allowed to continue existing in a reduced but technically alive capacity. A generous arrangement. Most species wept with gratitude. The humans had sent back a single audio message. It was 47 seconds of one of their ancient musical compositions, something called Thunder Road, followed by a human male's voice saying, "We'll leave the light on for you." Vorrkai intelligence analysts had spent 6 weeks trying to decode the threat embedded in that message. There was no threat. The humans were just being humans, which, as it turned out, was somehow worse. "Begin the approach formation," Ovaath ordered. "Standard planetary reduction sequence. I want this finished before the next rotation cycle." The fleet moved. 1,400 warships, each one larger than any city those humans had ever built, sliding through space in perfect, terrifying formation. The weapon systems alone could crack a moon. The shielding could absorb a star's output for several minutes before it became a problem worth discussing. Ovaath watched the approach feed on his display with the calm satisfaction of a predator that had never once been surprised by its prey. This was routine. This was procedure. This was Tuesday, so to speak, though the Vorrkai did not have Tuesdays. Then the sensors chimed. Bren leaned over his console, squinting at the readings. His expression did the thing where it tried to become a sneeze, and failed again. "Grand Admiral, we are detecting transmissions across the entire fleet, simultaneously." "Block them," Ovaath said. They are getting through anyway." Ovaath turned slowly. When a Grand Admiral of the Vorrkai turned slowly, people paid attention. "What do you mean, getting through anyway?" "I mean," Bren said, with the careful tone of someone diffusing a device they did not build and did not understand, that every communication system on every ship in our fleet is currently receiving the same signal simultaneously, without using any frequency we recognize, at a strength that should technically be impossible from a planet of their technological capability. The signal was audio only. It crackled to life across the command deck speakers whether Ovaath wanted it to or not. A voice, female, calm, almost bored-sounding. "Vorrkai Fleet, this is Commander Dara Voss of the Earth Perimeter Defense Division. Welcome to the solar system. We noticed you brought 1,400 ships. We want you to know that we appreciate the effort. We really do. It means a lot. However, there are a few things you should probably be aware of before you get too comfortable." Ovaath's 3 eyes narrowed to points. First, Dara Voss continued, the mines you passed through approximately 9 minutes ago, those were real. Second, the signal you are currently receiving is being broadcast from inside your own fleet's internal network. You are welcome to figure out how we got there. We will wait. Bren made a sound that was not quite a sneeze and not quite a scream. And third, the voice said, and there was something in her tone now, something quiet and absolute, like a door being locked from the other side. Your rear formation has already stopped moving. Check your sensors, Grand Admiral. Check them carefully. Ovaath checked. The rear 400 ships of the Vorrkai fleet were no longer answering communications. They were no longer answering anything at all. 400 ships. Gone. Not destroyed in the way Ovaath understood destruction. No explosions, no debris fields spreading across the sensor grid like shattered glass, no heat signatures fading out. They were simply absent, as if someone had reached into the universe and erased them with a thumb, the way you might smudge a chalk drawing on a board. Ovaath stared at the sensor display for a long time. Nobody on the command deck spoke. Nobody breathed particularly loudly either. The silence had the texture of something very fragile sitting on a very high shelf. Scan the area, he said finally. We have been scanning, Bren replied. His voice had acquired a new quality, something thin and stretched, like fabric pulled too tight. There is nothing to scan. Grand Admiral, there is simply nothing there. No wreckage, no radiation, no gravitational echo, 40,000 Vorrkai soldiers and 400 warships, and the only evidence they ever existed is a gap in our formation. Ovaath pulled up the communication channel. Commander Voss, he said, and he was proud of how steady his voice sounded, considering the circumstances. Explain what you have done. The response came immediately. She had been waiting. Gladly, Dara Voss said. What you just witnessed is what we call an echo collapse. It is a long story involving about 30 years of theoretical physics, 17 dead ends, one very stubborn engineer named Tolly Marsh who refused to accept that something was impossible just because everyone said so, and a lot of very strong coffee. The short version is, your rear formation no longer exists in this dimension. They are not dead. They are simply elsewhere. Whether they come back depends entirely on what you do in the next 4 minutes. Ovaath processed this. You are bluffing, he said. Grand Admiral, Dara said, with the patience of someone explaining something to a very slow student. I just removed 400 of your warships from physical reality without firing a single conventional weapon. I am many things. Bluffing is not currently on the list. Bren tapped Ovaath on the shoulder with the energy of a man who wanted to say something urgently, but was also terrified of being the one who said it. Grand Admiral, she mentioned 4 minutes. I heard her. We are now at 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Ovaath turned back to the display. The remaining 1,000 ships of the fleet were still in formation, weapons hot, shields raised. On paper, they were still the most powerful military force within 6 star systems. On paper, this should still be straightforward. Paper, unfortunately, did not account for Tolly Marsh and his very strong coffee. What happens at the 4-minute mark? Ovaath asked. The next pulse charges, Dara said simply, and this time we have aimed it at your center formation. That is 600 ships, including, if I am reading our targeting data correctly, the Eternal Dominion. Another silence. This one had a different texture, sharper, more personal. You would destroy your own solar system to stop us, Ovaath said. That is not a defensive strategy, that is madness. See, that is a very Vorrkai way to think about it, Dara replied. And there was something in her voice now that Ovaath found deeply unsettling, something warm and almost amused, the way a person sounds when they are telling a story they already know the ending to. You assumed we built this thing to defend Earth. We did not. We built it because Tolly Marsh wanted to know if it could be built. Earth is fine. Earth is sitting behind 17 layers of shielding and one very large moon we reinforced 3 years ago specifically for situations like this one. The Echo collapse does not affect us at all. It only affects things we pointed at. Bren made his almost sneeze sound again. 2 minutes, Dara added helpfully. Ovaath looked at his fleet. He looked at the empty space where 400 ships had been. He looked at the planet below, small and blue and unremarkable, and apparently completely unbothered by the presence of 1,000 warships in its orbit. He thought about 6,000 years of Vorrkai conquest. He thought about 400 civilizations. He thought about the bones and the toothpicks. He thought about a human male's voice 8 months ago saying, "We'll leave the light on for you." "Fleet," Ovaath said quietly. "Stand down weapons. All ships begin withdrawal." The command deck let out a breath that had been held for several minutes. Dara Voss's voice returned one final time, and she sounded neither triumphant nor mocking. She sounded, if anything, genuinely warm. "Smart call, Grand Admiral. Your 400 ships will rematerialize approximately 3 light years behind you in about 6 hours. They will be confused and very hungry, but otherwise unharmed. Safe travels." The channel closed. The Vorrkai fleet turned around. Ovaath stood very still for a long moment, looking at the blue planet growing smaller on his rear display screen. Then, quietly, he said to no one in particular, "What, in 6,000 years of history was that?" Bren, who had finally, after everything, actually sneezed, wiped his face and said, "I believe, Grand Admiral, that was Tuesday."